You're listening
to the CD Baby
CD Baby
DIY
Musician Podcast.
Hey there, and welcome to episode number 86 of the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast. My name is Kevin Bruner, and in this episode, you're going to hear from Chris Anderson. Chris Anderson is an author and editor-in-chief of Wired magazine. I know many of you have read his book called The Long Tail, and CD Baby is a living example of some of the principles discussed in that book, especially the idea of infinite shelf space allowing for greater choice. In Chris's most recent book called Free, The Future of a Radical Price, Chris brings forth the idea that in a world where we are distributing bits, digital files, as opposed to atoms, which are physical goods, how using a free component to your marketing efforts can help reach a much broader audience. This little summary probably simplifies the idea way too much, so I would encourage you to pay close attention to what Chris is saying as you form an opinion and think up promotion ideas. It would be easy to grab a soundbite from the interview and get the wrong impression of what he's really trying to say. I know that it can be an emotionally charged topic for many, the idea of free music, and I'm very anxious to hear thoughts and comments about this interview. Don't forget, you can leave comments on our listener line at 206-426-5683 or email us at info@cdbabypodcast.com. Also, I will put links on the podcast page where you can get Chris's book for free. I'll link to both the free versions and the paid hard copy version. Well, let's get to my interview with Chris. Well, joining me on the phone is Chris Anderson, author of The Long Tail and a book called Free. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
It's a pleasure.
I'm excited to have you on the phone because this is one of the things we struggle with constantly with the artist community is the issue of free, the topic you wrote about in your latest book, and just the idea that, especially with digital goods, the ultimate price is going to end up at free just by the sheer gravity of the market. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how the book came about after you wrote The Long Tail? And then I've got some specific questions for you about the idea of free.
Sure. I mean, although I have to very quickly clarify that free is not the only price. That you're absolutely right that with digital goods, a price zero becomes an inevitable price, but not the only one. And the book is largely about freemium, which is combining free with paid, which we can talk more about. But the simple answer is that The Long Tail, who many of your readers may be familiar with, was my first book and article and sort of something I worked on for several years, was about the explosion of variety enabled by digital distribution and infinite shelf space. And that's an internet phenomena that changes the culture and business, and we all know all too well. But as I spent more time talking to people about that after the release of the book, it became clear that one of the aspects of the long tail, which is that of infinite shelf space, is only possible if the shelf space is costless. If shelf space has a cost, then you have to be discriminating about what you put on it, which is the case for physical retail. At Walmart, you need to be quite discriminating about what products get on the shelf of Walmart because that shelf space costs money. There's a rent that must be paid. With digital distribution, it's just a database entry often. So there are no limits, and as a result, we do have this explosion of choice. So free shelf space brought us this sort of cultural revolution of the long tail, and so I started thinking more about what free can do. And just sort of observed that the web has essentially created a country-sized economy, sort of Germany-sized economy, with a default price of zero. Most products and services are free on the web, and so I thought, well, if you have a country-sized economy with a default price of zero, surely there's an economic model to explain how that can be, and how it works. And I just really couldn't find one. Economics by and large doesn't deal with the price of zero very often, largely because that's not considered an economic question. It's once price goes to zero, it becomes somebody else's job. It's it's sociology, or it's psychology, or cultural anthropology or something, but it isn't economics. And so I thought, this was an opportunity to kind of formalize in some sense this phenomena that we know very well, which is these economies built around a price of zero, and apply some economic tools and lenses to understanding it.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the idea that you present that there's the idea of atoms versus bits, and how the psychology of the consumer is different when dealing with the hard goods as opposed to just digital materials that we can get off the web?
Yeah, so physical goods, atoms, if you will, have real costs. In economic terms, that's non-zero marginal costs. There's a real cost associated with that. There's a cost of producing, cost of distribution, cost of inventory, and all that kind of stuff. And those costs have to be paid back pretty quickly. So if you're selling muffins, you can give away maybe 1% of your muffins as free samples, but if you give away 99% of your muffins, you'll go out of business. Bits are different. They have near zero marginal costs of production and distribution. So you can give away 99% of your virtual muffins, and sell just 1% of the super muffins, if you will. And that's a perfectly good business. And that's really the difference between the two. And this has a corollary with psychology. My children wouldn't think of taking a CD out of a store. That's shoplifting. Mm-hmm. But they treat downloading a MP3 differently, and on some really kind of intuitive, innate level, they understand the difference between near zero and non-zero marginal cost, and they understand that one is stealing, and the other is really, they would argue that it's not a crime at all, but if pushed, they would at least argue it's a victimless crime. They understand that there's no physical cost to that, just opportunity costs. And I think we've seen a generation grow up with a kind of very, very distinct moral distinction between physical products and digital products, where one adheres to the rules of the traditional rules of ownership, and the other is sort of a brand new world.
And I find myself kind of caught in the middle of that, being an artist myself who is, making music and putting it out there for sale. But at the same time, someone passes me a band that I've never heard of, and technically it might be illegal to download the tracks, but at the same time I'm thinking I wasn't going to buy it anyway. It didn't cost them anything to get me this copy. And I might actually show up to a show because of this. And so,
indeed, and sometimes people are passing it to you, without the permission of the band, and sometimes it is fully with the permission of the band.
Yeah.
Every band who puts their music on MySpace, which is to say every band, is on some level, volunteering to give away their music for free in one form to drive demand for others.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that you highlight in the book that I think is one of the camps that some artists who are kind of against the idea of free fall into, which I think there's several distinct camps that people tend to fall into that are musicians or content creators with the idea of giving it out for free. But one was, you're talking about advertisers think consumers who pay are more valuable. They've made an emotional and financial commitment, and they want the product and will treasure it. And I think this is a big sticking point for artists and content creators in general, that where they may be able to get their music to more people, but ultimately those people may care less. And
I would say that I'm always mystified when people, as I often hear, and you just did talk about musicians who are against free music. Free music has been part of music for as long as there's been radio. Mm-hmm. Radio is free music, right? No one, I don't know of anyone who objects to their music being played on radio, even though they may often get no money from that, because they understand the marketing value of that. Now, that is obviously, the consumer doesn't own that music. The music they can't control when it comes on. But the idea of some form of free music as a good form of marketing is completely conventional and accepted in the music industry. What we end up arguing about is other forms. How far should you you take that. So you're absolutely right that if you can create scarcity, if you can create even artificial scarcity, you can increase the perceived value of some music. And a few years ago it was cool for some bands to only to only release their music on flexi disc. You may remember what a flexi disc is. Those things that used to be in magazines in the 80s.
Yes.
You had to put a penny on it so it would lie flat on your record player, etc. And apparently there was like one factory in Czechoslovakia that was still making flexi discs. And the idea that if you actually had heard that music, you were so cool that you knew someone who could get you one of the 300 flexi discs. That was and that is all about exclusivity and artificial scarcity. And it's obviously no business model, since that's no way to be selling music. But it is a kind of a revolt against the sort of commodification and sort of free for all that is the MP3 world.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that you kind of mentioned the idea of that flexi disc and it being a scarce item, and artists like Radiohead and Nine Inch Nails have done a lot of experimenting with the idea of free. And when Nine Inch Nails did, it seemed like he was a little, Trent Reznor was a little disappointed with the results. I think he thought he was going to have a bigger impact than he did. But it seemed to do well for them. But the thought is, can somebody completely unknown really take advantage of that as a content creator and really elevate themselves to a level that really gets them attention?
Well, let me answer with one word. OK Go.
The band OK Go.
Yep.
And their video that went
correct.
Viral. Yes.
Would OK Go have become the success they are had it not been for a distribution channel that allowed them to be seen by people, by lots of people who might not have paid up front for the privilege?
Yeah, and I agree with that example completely. I think where it falls more in line with some of the artists that we have here, just completely independent, just starting out. And I think sometimes they feel like, well, similar to the scenario that you presented in your book that I have here, where you're talking about artists, because I know artists struggle with it, with their talking about the perceived quality based on price. And you mentioned the salt and ketchup are always free, and we expect that, and we don't make assumptions about the quality based on that. But if say, a magazine, like you work at Wired Magazine there, if you guys started giving away your magazine for free, like just at the grocery store, there might be a perception that, it must not be as good a quality as it was. And I think some artists still struggle with the idea, if I'm starting out and I'm just giving everything away for free, that, when you compare it to somebody like the superstars that are out there, like U2 and all that, it's like people might have this perception that I'm not as good, even though a lot of the quality of the albums people are making these days is amazing. Yeah.
So I kind of actually quite distinctly disagree with that. I mean, Tim O'Reilly, runs O'Reilly Publishing, sort of famously put it best, which is that the enemy of most artists is not piracy but obscurity. Mm-hmm. The truth is that the first barrier is awareness. You need to be heard. Now obviously at the end of the day you need to make a living, and if you want to make a living at music, and not everybody does, the notion of quitting your day job is not available to all. Mm-hmm. But if you want to make a living at the end of the day, you have to you have to find some way to charge. But there are lots of ways to do that by saying, well, okay, I'm giving away one thing, but I'm not giving away everything. I may be giving away the music, but I'm not giving away the concert. I may be giving the music in MP3, but I'm not giving away the music in a high bit rate MP3. Or I may be giving away these songs, but not those songs. I may be giving away the MP3s, but not the boxed set, the Radiohead model, et cetera. And this is in classic economics, what you do is you just create product differentiation. You have lots of products. You segment your audience into those who want the free one and those who want the paid ones, and then some of them want the $1, the 99-cent paid one. Some of them want the $10.99 paid one. Some of them want the $49 concert. Some of them want the $119 box set. And you just this is not rocket science. This is the way businesses work for a long time.
Well, I like the quote that you have in the book. by Carl Shirky. For a creator more interested in attention than income, free makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of artists, that is, like you said, obscurity is their biggest issue, and not whether or not they can make $1 off their music, and it's just getting people to notice in the first place. But I personally wonder if the issue of abundance starts to play in. Now that we have these infinite shelves online where we can stock everything on the planet, does that start to create a problem where people just don't care as much?
I don't know. There's no evidence that we care less about music because we have more music. Now, we may care, on average, because there's so much, because the denominator in that equation is so large. Maybe on average we care less about, a piece of music. But, I find that, as I have more choice and as a result, and more importantly, more advice in making that choice, social networks, search, blogs, word of mouth, all this kind of stuff. I find myself listening to more music. I find myself, I'm a middle-aged man, right? So middle-aged men are not supposed to be up to speed on music, and I wouldn't call myself totally up to speed on music, but I'm not stuck in my 20s anymore. Mm-hmm. I'm into bands that were, created in the last 5 years, which is a real triumph for a guy my age. That's only possible because this infinite shelf space has also created the best music discovery engine, and between Pandora and Rhapsody and word of mouth from people I know, and I'm lucky to work around cool people. I'm kind of keeping up pretty well, which is exciting, and I listen to tons of music, and it's really important to me. So I don't think there's been a diminution of my relationship with music. I want to come back to one thing though that you said you were talking about before, and I just want to make super clear one thing, which is that there is no one model for everybody. Mm-hmm. Some artists want attention more than money. They want to be heard. They want to get an audience. They want to, be appreciated. And they may choose to use free. They may find free the best way to do that. Others, maybe studio musicians or whatever, it's a business for them. And they will take a different path. I would say that one of the sort of biggest misunderstandings of this whole thing is that there is, that everyone must make it free, or that everyone must follow this path and make money off concerts, and it's just not the case. You need to find what's right for you and your potential audience. And if you're here to be, if you just want to be heard, free's great. If you want to fill a concert hall, there's ways to do that as well. If fundamentally this is your living and you just want to stay in your room and make music and never leave and sell MP3s, well, you need to use a different form of free, or maybe no form of free at all.
Yeah, I agree totally. And I think that's one thing that frustrates artists, is that maybe they have to think a little bit more about what their little business model that's right for them, where in the past it was pretty much dictated to them.
Well, the truth is, in the past, they didn't have a business model because they weren't going to get signed to a label. The vast majority of artists were never going to get signed to a label, and there was never going to be a business there of any size at all. The liberating thing about the fact that you can now publish without a label is accompanied by an obligation to think like an entrepreneur. On some level, every artist who wants to create make a living from their art is going to have to be a small business person. Mm-hmm. They're going to have to think like an entrepreneur. They're going to have to put their business hat on, because you can't count on the industry to do it for you anymore.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I always think about, I agree with that from the artist perspective, but from the consumer side, when you talk about having infinite access to some great music that's free, and definitely access that's cheaper than it was in the past, does that start to, make the consumers less interested? Having those gatekeepers eliminated, it seems like, on one hand, I like that I can access anything on the internet, but sometimes you want somebody to tell you that something's good.
Well, you still can. access is not, let's say, information is not knowledge, and knowledge is not wisdom. There are, the internet without Google is useless. The internet with Google, that is someone telling you, where to go, is incredibly useful. So I think that, all this abundance of information actually increases the importance of these tastemakers, of these filters, of these, word of mouth, maven kind of figures. And, I become increasingly dependent on advice now to drive me towards things I would like. It's all out there, but I can't be bothered to find it. And I should note that there's one of the paradoxes in many people's mind, but there's really no paradox at all, is how iTunes can exist and succeed in a world of free music. I mean, we know that everything you want is out there for free, and yet iTunes sells, I don't know what
they just crossed 10 billion.
Just past 10 billion. Why would anyone pay 99 cents for a song when they know it's out there for free? And the answer is they're not buying music. What they're buying is convenience. The iTunes experience is a way to very simply get the music, ensure that it's what you want at the bit rate. That it is going to work with your with your library, work with your iPod or other MP3 player. That it's what you're buying is time savings. And in general, younger people tend to have more time than money, and they may 99 cents may be significant, for them, and they may choose to spend the time on, one of the peer-to-peer sites, peer-to-peer services looking for free music. But as you get older, you tend to have more money than time, and then you value the convenience of the iTunes experience, the security of the iTunes experience, the sort of seamless nature of it. 99 cents is trivial compared to the time it would take you to find that music, and at a quality you wanted. And so this conversion of the music industry or music retail from selling products to selling a convenience service is really the kind of the lesson of iTunes, and in many ways a kind of an interesting lesson in psychology. Time is money, and convenience and security and and simplicity are all valuable assets that you can charge for.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more, because that's the main reason I use iTunes. I've got an iPhone and an iPod, and I want something that's going to integrate with it without me having to spend 10 minutes every time I download an album, updating the meta tags, transferring it to where it needs to be. It's just done for me, and it's so much easier.
Precisely.
Well, you are a content creator as well, and I think it's interesting that I saw your book in the store. I think it was Christmas time, and I thought, I want to go home and get the audiobook. And I went and looked in iTunes, and it wasn't there yet. And I checked back later, and there it was. And I pulled out my card ready to buy it, and I realized, it's free. It fits right along with what he's talking about. But how did that play into, your publisher, and how did that deal work out? And do you think it's paid more dividends because you did allow some of it free as opposed to forcing everyone to buy it?
Yeah. Well, obviously, I needed to walk the talk and wanted to walk the talk. So I wanted to play the freemium model, to let the book be an experiment in everything the book was talking about. And so I wanted there to be free versions, and I also wanted there to be premium paid versions. And, the publisher was going to make their own decisions, but I did want there to be one that I controlled entirely myself, just so that I could just do what I thought was right, regardless of the commercial interests of other big companies. And so I reserved the rights to the audiobook myself, and paid for and recorded it myself with my own voice, and paid for the studio time and paid for the editing time, and it wasn't cheap, and we did a good job. And what I knew is that I would have a version of the book. This is the unabridged, the total MP3 for the whole book, available not only at zero cost, but in every part of the world. Mm-hmm. No region locking, obviously it's English, so, I didn't translate it into every language, but there was going to be one version that would be absolutely 100% free forever, everywhere. And that I could control that. What's interesting is that and which is slightly disappointing to me, is that you didn't see that there were two audiobooks. There was the free unabridged one, but there's also the abridged one, for 3 hours versus 6 hours. That was $9.99. We actually had sort of this was a little more clever than it sounds. Because time is money, we were going to actually charge more for less. for the abridged one, which is half the content, is also you get 3 hours of your life back. Unfortunately, because we don't control the retail experience, we weren't able to make that choice super clear to you. Did you even notice that there was an abridged version for $9.99?
No, in fact, the first time I searched for it, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm in the podcast section, and it's all released.
We also released it as a podcast.
Yeah,
I realized it.
And so that's where I ended up. And then today, when I was searching again to finish off my notes, I found, there is the regular version in the audiobook section, but I didn't see the unabridged version. Yeah, I mean the abridged version.
Yeah, exactly. So it was kind of a mess. That's one of the lessons about the freemium equation is you've got to make it clear and simple. And we did a dizzying array of free and paid versions. So there were web versions of the book on Scribd and Google Books, and there was the Kindle version, the Sony ebook version. And each one was somewhere in some regions, and some were not in regions, and some were available for a week, and some were available for a month. And then there's the excerpts, and it was just too much. And very few of them, and in fact, none of them were sort of cleanly connected to the full paid version, either hardcover or digital book. So the lesson was less is more in this case. That if you're going to use the freemium equation, ensure that it's a simple proposition. Here's the free form, here's the paid form, or here's the free form and here's the paid forms, plural. Here's why you would choose one versus the other. One click here or one click there. All kind of coming to one or two places, not sort of not dozens of competing offers out there on the web. Hey, lesson learned.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I even had a note here that in the book how you talk about the mental dilemma that when people go through the process of making selections, especially when there's several pricing structures, that customers can get confused or just not make a choice. And I definitely think with artists, I think that's the temptation, is that they'll just you can go to their MySpace page or their website, and there'll be like a dozen different offers flashing in people's faces, and it's just like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do here?
Exactly. Just think about the consumer experience. Try to control the sort of the end-to-end thing as much as possible. So free is matched with paid, and it's clear what the deal is right up front.
And I know in your book you talk a lot about the idea of something that's being truly free, like what you see a lot on the web now, and then maybe in the past century where we got used to the idea of it was, you got something free with the purchase. Do you think it's important that as artists or a content creator who, if it may be great that your music gets passed around, but that you kind of build in something where you get an email address or something, or do you think it's worth a shot of just like, free is free, people want it without any sort of strings attached?
I think strings attached are okay if they're totally transparent. Again, one size doesn't fit all. I mean, I think what you don't want is bait and switch. What you don't want is something that looks free but really isn't, and the bill shows up in your mail, you go into the store thinking it's free but realize that the fine print says otherwise.
Yeah.
If you want to say, look, this is free, but give us your email address, that seems cool. As long as you're transparent about it and transparent about what you would do with that email address. If you could say, there are in the software world, there are loads of models that have limits. Shareware or sort of demos. This is free, but a game's free for 5 levels, but you have to pay if you want to go beyond that. The software is free for 30 days, but it expires. This software is free for 3 users, but not more. So as long as you're transparent about the limits, then let consumers make a choice, I think it's fine.
Well, I'd like to talk about your experience there at Wired Magazine a little bit before we wrap up. It seems like a lot of the way things are moving online, and we hear about magazines struggling and having issues now that people can get content online for free. And I saw that you guys are doing one of the coolest things I had seen a magazine do in a while, where I saw the demo for the iPad that you guys had online, and that seemed like a cool idea in a way to sort of reinvent yourself into the digital world. What are you guys doing with that idea, just in general with Wired magazine? How to keep it fresh and financially viable in the new internet age?
Yeah. Well, a couple things. The tablet represents, I think, a new opportunity for media like ours, which is to say that it's an idealized or rich media consumption platform, which is to say, you can create a immersive, designed experience that stands out in a way that you can't do with an HTML in a browser. And I think the iPhone apps are an example of that on a smaller screen. The Kindle is an example of that within books, and the tablet is going to have all the advantages, distribution advantages of the Kindle, but and the sort of rich media advantages of the iPhone, but on a bigger screen with a really intimate experience. I think they're going to be huge, and so we're betting big on this. But it's worth noting that not all print media is created equal. Newspapers are struggling, but I work for Condé Nast, which is not just Wired, but Vogue and Vanity Fair and New Yorker, and and lots of other titles. And we actually have never been bigger. Our circulation has never been larger than it is right now. Wired circulation has never been larger than it is right now. So although obviously we're all challenged on the business side in an advertising recession, in terms of people actually still wanting the product and having it stand out, even amidst the competition from the web, that continues to work. So I think what we have is a product model. We have a business model problem, not a product problem. And the tablet is an opportunity to get the efficiencies of digital distribution and measurability of the experience, and all the video and the interactive elements, while still delivering this kind of highly curated, highly designed, really kind of carefully put together experience that makes the kind of glossy high-end magazines like Condé Nast magazine stand out.
Well, I for one definitely prefer reading Wired magazine, holding the actual magazine, as opposed to just looking at articles on the web. It's a totally different experience, in my opinion. And
and many others, as the numbers suggest. And I think that the problem, there's no, like books. There's nothing wrong with books. It's just the problem is books aren't present in our lives often enough.
Yeah.
Unless you go into a bookstore, you sometimes forget about them. We live on the web, and books don't live on the web. So the great thing about the Kindle is they could put books back into people's lives. And I think the same thing about magazines. We all love beautifully produced magazines, but if they don't show up in the mail, or we don't happen to be walking by an airport newsstand, we just don't see them that often, and or don't see them often enough. One of the rules of marketing is meet people where they live, and if people want to live with their portable mobile digital devices, then we should meet them there and bring our experience to them rather than requiring them to come to our experience.
Well, I think that's some good advice to end on, because I really think that some artists forget that they're trying to produce content and provide an experience for a listener or end user, and it's not necessarily important how the artist wants to experience it, but how the end user would like to experience it.
Exactly.
Well, Chris, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk on the podcast, and I'll put a link to your books in the podcast notes, so our listeners can go check them out.
And you'll make clear why someone would want the paid hardcover edition rather than the free audiobook. It makes an excellent gift and it looks fantastic on your shelf.
There you go. It makes you look smart. That's Well, thank you very much.
All right, thanks so much.
That's going to bring us to the end of another episode. I'd really like to hear your thoughts and comments on the ideas Chris shared. Are you doing some sort of free giveaway that is really expanding your reach and creating more fans? Does the idea of giving away free music anger you? I know it does for some of you. I want to hear all the opinions out there, so feel free to call our listener line at 206-426-5683. You can also email us at info@cdbabypodcast.com. If we get enough comments, we might just dedicate a show to your feedback. And lastly, don't forget, I'll have links on the podcast website to where you can download the free audiobook of Free, We just scratched the surface in this interview. So if something in the interview sparked some ideas, I encourage you to check out the book, as there are a lot of different scenarios and business models covered with some good ideas. Well, that's going to do it. We'll catch you next time. Bye. You've been listening to the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast, broadcasting from Portland, Oregon, USA.